Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Kaiserslautern. Welcome to the Fritz-Walter Stadion here in Kaiserslautern for what has been Norwich City's final pre-season friendly fixture here in Germany on their pre-season training camp. It's finished 0-0 between the Bundesliga 2 side and the Championship side, both in the second tiers of their respective divisions, and maybe gave us a truer indication of where Norwich City are at the minute because unlike Darmstadt, maybe this is a team that's not at the start of their pre-season. This is a team that certainly has hopes of doing something pretty good next year in the second division by all accounts. And it felt probably a sterner test in really good conditions. I mean, just to give you a pan round of the stadium, I don't want to move it too much, so I don't want to upset the tripod or the angle that I've manipulated, but it's a magnificent arena to play football. To give you some kind of indication of the atmosphere here today, we didn't get an official attendance, so I can't give you that, I'm afraid, but these fans regularly fill out this stadium, around 45,000 every single week. And Norwich City's players were booed pretty vigorously, actually, as they came out onto the pitch to begin their warm-up. So this felt anything but a friendly, to be honest, and probably more into that test category that David Wagner likes to adopt for pre-season fixtures. But a really interesting game, and a game that I think we can take a lot from, both positively and negatively from a Norwich City perspective. As I said, it finished 0-0. There wasn't a whole host of goal-mouth action to speak about and to discuss. Lots of Norwich City players got minutes. From a fitness perspective, I think it served its purpose. We even had not that you'd be able to tell now, but we had a really heavy thunderstorm in the second half that forced the players off the pitch around the hour mark for a good 5-10 minutes or so. Lightning was coming down. It was pretty incredible, really. It's a pre-season game that had lots about it, and I think I was told as Norwich players were walking in this afternoon, they were kind of looking up at their surroundings and, wow, what a place to play your football. And it's a magnificent arena. We had lots of fans. There's a standing terrace just to my left as I'm stood here. And that was full to the brim, really, of Kaiserslautern fans, as was that sort of big stand behind me there. So a really good encounter. And actually, for the first 30 minutes of the game, I thought Norwich City started very well. They built up well. Again, spoke a lot about the build-up structure in the last third. I did that 3-3-4 that they're looking now at doing, that maybe gives them a little bit more control. But also they were getting a lot of joy out of Marcelino Nunez, who was, for the opening 30 minutes, really dictating the tempo and the way that Norwich City were attacking. They was kind of orchestrating that, and that was positive. And he played a couple of really nice balls through. I remember one in particular to Liam Gibbs, but he was getting on the ball. He was looking busy, I think is probably the best word to use to describe his performance. And he was really influential in what Norwich City was trying to do in terms of getting on the front foot, dominating the game, utilising the wide areas. And the structure and the shape of the team, both in and out of possession, looked pretty good, I thought, actually. But for that first 30 minutes, Norwich were really on top. Not really creating too much, to be honest, but certainly in terms of territory, in terms of possession, they had a lot of it, and they were utilising it in a pretty positive way, even if that wasn't necessarily converting into clear-cut chances. Adam Eder was holding the ball up well. Przemysław Poheta was looking pretty lively and pretty threatening. Liam Gibbs is a player who really likes to drive into space. He's a real heads-up footballer, is the way I would describe him. He knows when to change the pace of a game if it needs to go a bit quicker or a bit smaller. So a bit lower, sorry. But the opening 30 minutes, I think there's a lot of positives that you can take out of that in structure and in the way that Norwich played. Also, as a positive, before maybe I get onto the more pressing stuff, defensively, I think Norwich are looking much better. They've come over here and they've not conceded a goal, and to be honest, that's never really looked in that much threat. I think we saw it in a bit in the second half. Opoku, who came on for Kaiserslautern at half-time, 24-year-old winger, looked very lively, caused Sam McCallum a lot of problems, and Norwich generally a lot of problems. And he had one chance at a near post that he kind of scooped round, and then there was a shot that Tim Krul saved, and there was a block as well, I think. But beyond that, Norwich never really looked threatened. They defended central areas well. They controlled transitions well because of that structure that we spoke about after Darmstadt, that sort of 3-3-4 one that we discussed. And they are, as a general rule of thumb, looking more solid and looking more defensively capable, which, given, David Wagner said towards the end of last season that his team needed to kind of cut out the individual errors and the silly goals that they were conceding, that has to be seen as a positive. And Shane Duffy in particular has made a huge impact, I think, in that particular department. But just the overall general shape of the team looks better. I was at an opening training session that they held yesterday, and Narcis Pelash was doing a lot of work in terms of their defensive shape and recovery running and kind of position filling, so to speak. And it was a little drill where they were kind of getting the centre-back was being pulled out into wide areas, and the full-backs were then having to cover their position for sort of crossing opportunities, really. But it kind of speaks volume to the meticulous nature that they're working in that department. Kenny McLean alluded to it. And so, yeah, that portion of the game is good. And actually, you look at David Wagner's career as a coach, both at Huddersfield and at Schalke, his teams have, by and large, been pretty good from a defensive perspective and a rest defence perspective, and obviously transitionally as well. Where the issues have maybe come is up the pitch, and that kind of issues with creativity and ingenuity as well. I would describe that as being in the final third, and that's where Norwich City are. And I know it kind of feels like I'm parroting a lot of last season's view and a lot of last season's verdict on how the season unravelled, I guess. But it's still true, and I still feel, I was trying desperately to think about it during the game, how best was to sum it up. I just think it's all a bit safe. You've got players who are happy to receive the ball with their back to goal, happy to play it, and hoping almost that their movement and the cleverness of their runs will kind of engineer opportunities. Or we're looking at crossing opportunities, really, from open play situations, and the fullback's getting really high. But as soon as opponents work that out and they become a bit more rigid and they read Norwich a bit more, Norwich struggle in those open play moments. They don't have a player in the final third, maybe beyond the exception of Onel Hernandez, but then we could probably get in a discussion around that final action, the quality of it with him. They don't have that player who's just capable of sparking something, creating something, changing a picture, changing a tempo in the final third. They're quite one-dimensional and quite flat in the final third. There's nobody that really gets me excited in this Norwich City attacking lineup at this moment in time. Fritz-Walter, I think, has had a good pre-season. I think he's been one of Norwich City's better wide players. John Rowe, still incredibly raw, but there's a huge amount of potential with him. I still feel that he needs to be a little bit better in terms of his decision-making and knowing when to commit a man. We've not really seen him have a run at a defender yet, at a full-back yet. Hernandez, for the reasons that I've said, I think is the most qualified to do that, and it's why he'll be in around the start of it next season. Christos Goalless at the moment just looks short of confidence, and you don't really have players who are capable of unlocking doors or unlocking tight defences or combining or just providing something a little bit different, being a little bit off the cuff, improvising in attacking areas. And that for me feels like it has to be a priority for Norwich City in the next few weeks to bring someone in capable of changing the picture and changing the dynamic of a game. And obviously there was a lot of hope that Borja Sainz would be that player and that he would be capable of doing that. But even then, it's a lot of pressure to rest on one person's shoulders. And that's right. A lot of people said it was an issue last season. It was. It just feels to me, because Norwich don't naturally want to play with a 10 because of the way that David Wagner likes to play up and maybe the system is contributing to this lack of creativity somewhat, but it just feels like it needs an injection of something, almost like a shock factor to it. There's nothing exciting about the way Norwich City try and attack at the moment. It's very intelligent, it's smart at points, they try and make clever movements, but there's just not that spontaneity, that natural, maybe talent is the word, I don't know, that feels harsh on the operators who are in there, because they're all obviously professional footballers, they're all incredibly talented, but there's just not that spark and not that thing that gets me really excited about Norwich City from an attacking perspective at the moment. And that is rightly where the focus lies. I spoke to David Wagner after the game. He said they're still looking for a wide area. In wide areas, they still want to add an option. I'd still expect Goalless to go out on loan. Fritz-Walter could do, but I think he is making a decent case to be in around it next year. I spoke to him after the game as well, and kind of he conceded that there's work to do in offensive areas. So that for me now feels like the point that needs to be worked on and the area that needs to be addressed. And at the moment, I'm not sure they have the options in the building to answer those questions and to answer the concerns that they have at this moment in time. I think the solution is going to have to come externally, and you can keep John Rowe around that because I still think he has a lot to offer. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of my fear, this, because it's a theme of David Wagner teams for all that we spoke about the positive defensive work that they've done, and they do look a lot better structurally, both in terms of defensively and the way that they want to build up with the ball. That attacking structure still isn't right, and they still don't have the ability, I think, to to score goals on a consistent basis. I'm still in the back of my head asking myself that question of how is this Norwich team going to score goals on a consistent basis, and that has been a concern that has followed David Wagner around a bit, and it's kind of summed up why his teams have been a little bit streaky throughout his career. So it's a big couple of weeks in the transfer market in that regard, because they're going to have to find options that can come in and can push it forward, because right now, I think if this was the quota of wide options that you were to take into the new championship season, I think you'd be a little bit concerned at that, to be honest. Obviously, it's worth noting as well, Jack Stacey's been a major sort of source, I guess, of what Norwich City have tried to do from an attacking perspective. He didn't play today and ended up at centre-back because of what looked like a quite worrying injury to Jonathan Tompkinson. David Wagner confirmed after the game it was serious and it was ankle ligaments. We've seen Tompkinson subsequently with a big old boot on his foot, so that doesn't look good. He would, by all accounts, have been in the mix, I suspect. The fact that he's here ahead of Brad Hills and Jayden Warner, I would suggest that to mean that he was in there. So, yeah, it's interesting, because I think a lot of people will have felt positive about Tuesday night and not as positive about today. I think it's important to put it in context. There were some positive aspects today and improved aspects as well, but that fundamental of thrust and attacking excitement, it's just not there at the moment. And I remember talking about exactly the same thing in pre-season last year, about them not maybe struggling for creativity and not necessarily looking like they were in best place to score a goal, and that point kind of remains. And I think that would be the fear at the moment with them. And I think if you could add 2, I think it probably needs 2, maybe even more than that in the long term. But you have to be realistic in terms of a window. I still think they need 2 options in there, if I'm being brutally honest, and they need 2 quality options and 2 different options to what they've got. I think Goalless, Poeta, Rowe, Hernandez, all wingers that kind of want to get at people. I guess you could argue how much we've seen that or not. I think we need to see some technicians, some creators, some people who are capable of getting on the ball and making things happen. That kind of feels where Norwich are at the moment. They've got a lot of players who want to get on the end of stuff, and not a lot of players who want to be the pass and want to provide the opportunity for those players to get on the end of it. So that primarily is I guess where I'm leaving Germany, which has been a very productive trip, I think, for Norwich City from a fitness perspective, from the 2 games that they've had, which have represented a real increase in test compared to what we had in the first week of pre-season. That obviously then ups subsequently over the next couple of weeks with games against Alkmaar next Wednesday, which I'm really looking forward to, and obviously Toulouse and Austria as well. So it's going to be really interesting. But the conclusion I'm coming to pretty rapidly is that this Norwich team cannot go into the championship season with the options that it currently has in wide areas. And I think deep down, having spoken to David Wagner, I asked him if he wanted more creativity in the squad. He said he did. I think he knows that as well. So I think it is going to be a big 2 weeks, because it's something like that that can be the difference between getting in the top 6, as we saw last season, and not. So, yeah, I think it's been an interesting day to maybe expose the shortcomings of where Norwich were. Stuart Webber was here. Neil Adams were here today. They will both have seen that. David Wagner will have seen it as well. But this was a good test. It was a good test. It's been a good trip for Norwich City. They've got out of it what they wanted to get out of it. They're flying back tonight. We're not flying back until tomorrow night. So we've got a little bit more time to assess, and we'll be recording a podcast in that period of time as well. In terms of the game itself, it's not too much to report, really. It wasn't that much goal-mouth action. Norwich City's best opening really probably came in that first 30-minute spell that I spoke about, where they looked pretty good by all accounts. There was a cross, I think, from Goalless that landed on Adam Ida's head, and he just tried to nod it back across the face of goal. I'd need to watch it again in terms of his position, but he looked in a pretty good position to try and get something on it. I don't think there was a lot of pace in the cross, so whether that was kind of his judgment. And, you know, for all the criticism that he gets, I felt he held the ball up pretty well at points today. And he can only, and again, similarly to Temu Pukki last year, if there's no service there, it's going to be very difficult for him and Ashley Barnes and Josh Sargent as well. So, yeah, it's a big few weeks, I think. David Wagner confirmed that Max Aarons and Milo Rashica will be back next week, which is good news, but I also don't expect them to be here at the start of the season, so fine. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few weeks, as I've repeated a few times now. Thank you very much for watching, not just this video verdict, but Darmstadt as well, the podcast. You can go and check that out. It's a bit chaotic, but We speak about Adam Eder in a bit more detail there. I suspect we'll be talking about Norwich City's attacking elements on tomorrow's show as well. Plenty more analysis and reaction over on our website, of course, if you're not yet to do so. You'll be sick about me banging on about it, but the Pink and Plus app, get yourself on there. You can get a month's free trial. That will take you into the start of the new season. It really is the best time to do that. You can go and check that out now. And of course, thanks to our sponsors, Cabell Healthcare. Go and check them out if you're looking for a job in care or you're looking for someone to care for a loved one. They do a great job in and around East Anglia and Norfolk. But from Kaiserslautern, from the Fritz-Walter Stadion, which I've really enjoyed, it's let me just move out of the way, and you can see a glimpse of what it's like. It's a fabulous venue. We'll return to Germany. We'll return from Germany. Sorry. The question is, do we return with more questions than answers, or more answers than questions? Thanks very much for watching.